Hi, guys. Since what you're reading you're coming back to Pilgrim's Progress, and you're going to be covering the stories of Doubting Castle and Dungeon of Despair. But since Pilgrim is supposed to be staying on the King's Highway, and the King's Highway is outdoors, I thought I would come back outdoors again to talk to you a little bit about what you're going to be reading over the next couple days and your assignment on page 169 and 170, which is not what you're going to do today, but what you're going to do when you're reading on your next reading assignment. I wanted to give you some clarity just to be able to think that through. So let's just talk a little bit about what you're going to be reading. You're going to be reading the story, and you're familiar with it because we've already read Pilgrim's Progress. You're going to be reading Doubting Castle and Dungeon of Despair. And it's interesting how Pilgrim and Hopeful get to Doubting Castle. And, when we think about castles, we always think of something that can be beautiful and gorgeous. You think Sleeping Beauty's castle in Disney World or something of that, or the castles in Europe, very majestic and beautiful and just very grand. But within this castle that Christian and Hopeful are going to, there's also going to be a place called the Dungeon of Despair. And this is going to be a very dark and a very frightening place. And we always need to remember that when we set out on our King's Highway, which is the journey that we take as followers of Jesus Christ, that God says for us to stay on the path, to stay on the King's Highway. And when we venture from that path, that's when our troubles begin, when we start thinking that there's a better way than what God has already told us to do. And I want to remind you guys that this story, Pilgrim's Progress, is an allegory, which means you have your surface level story, but then you have the meaning below the surface level story. And if you're truly reading these stories and taking them to heart, we're just not seeing the journey of Christian and Hopeful and everybody else that he meets. We see ourselves as Christian, and we look a little deeper to say, what does it mean? What is it? What is the King's Highway? You'll notice that Bunyan describes the King's Highway as sometimes it's pleasant, but sometimes it's difficult. And we'll find there's a little bit of difficulty on the King's Highway that leads Christian to make a decision and to bring Hopeful in on his decision because things got a little difficult. He thought there could be a better way. And we need to remember that as we walk our life as a Christian, we may come through difficult situations, but the Lord is always with us, ready to strengthen us as we walk in obedience to him. So just take note of that. I also want you guys to notice what you're going to see on page 417 as the bypath meadow. Take careful note of that. Notice how the meadow starts very close to the King's Highway, and then notice what happens as the story progresses. I told you the story, why Mrs. Crawford never camps anymore, that I came to what I thought was the right choice. Little did I know there was a fork in the road. And though the forks started very close together when I first saw it, by the time I had finished, was I still close to the right path, or was I far away from the right path? And if you remember that story, I was far away from the right path, and it took a long time for me to get back to the path I needed to be on. And you'll see that Christian and Hopeful are going to come into the same situation as they take this journey. So I want you to remember to read thoughtfully. Find a good spot within your house that you like to do your reading. Maybe you have a comfy space on the couch. Maybe there's a special spot in your room where you can just be alone and really digest what Bunyan is trying to tell us. The other thing I want to talk to you about is the assignment that you're going to be doing, not today, but the next time you do your reading. So after you do Dungeon of Despair, this is going to be the assignment out of your activity book that goes with Dungeon of Despair. And you're going to be doing pages 169, 170, and it says along the King's Highway. And the directions say choose the answer that each character or place from the Pilgrim's Progress stands for, which means no surface level thinking. This is requiring you to dig in and say, what is Bunyan trying to tell me? What is this place really? And I'm going to do just 2 of them with you to give you an idea to put your mind on the right way of thinking. So number 1 on page 69, the character is Christian, and then your choices are any preacher, any Christian writer, or any saved person. So if you're Christian in the story, do you have to be a preacher? Do you have to be a writer? Or can you be anybody who's a follower of Jesus Christ, which is any saved person? What do you think that is? If you say any saved person, you're thinking like Bunyan, and you have that down. The last one I'm going to do with you, and remember you're going to do page 169 and 170. This is still on page 169, and this is number 9 that I'm going to do with you now. It's Deep River, the last step of the journey. And again, you can call on your memory of reading Pilgrim's Progress to help you with this. So what is the Deep River, the last stage of our journey before we go to what Bunyan calls the celestial city, or what we know as heaven? Is that any temptation? Is that death? Or is that baptism? What is our last stage of our journey? And the answer is kind of in the question. What is our last stage before we enter the kingdom of heaven? If you said death, you would be correct. You'd be thinking like Bunyan. So what I want to remind you is on page 169 and 170, you're looking for the hidden meaning. You're supposed to remember that Pilgrim's Progress is an allegory. It's telling you a secret story within the story. So you really need to be weeding out what that secret story is so you can answer those correctly. And remember, page 169 and 170, your parents will be snapping a photo of that and sending that to me, because we will be taking a grade on that. So make sure that you are thinking like Bunyan and looking for that secret story. Please take the time to enjoy this. I know as you're reading Pilgrim's Progress, the phrasing is not what you would normally use in general conversation. But I think you guys can grasp that story and understand what Bunyan is trying to tell you. So take your time. If you want to come outside, if mom and dad say that's okay. If you'd like to do that, that's fine. But just take a time and enjoy the story. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.